Now this video covers some of the restoration of Mark Morgan's Fz600. It's taken from many videos, and the shakedown ride we all went on together with our late friend Bob Nevola, and some good memories along the way. I'm so happy I have these videos to look back at. Bob Nevola, we miss you dearly. These are the parts for the Fz600 restoration and some other ones that we had for another bike that belonged to Mark Morgan. A lot of body work, a lot of repairs. There's some pearl white. We had some issues with the paint compatibility. Should be some good information on this video. There was a couple of unique things in this restoration. Mark had bought some paint from a friend, and it was not compatible with the paint we normally were using. We later found out it wasn't really the paint, it was the thinner he bought that was not compatible. We had a lot of tabs and a lot of repair, and as everybody knows, I reinforce all these, even the ones before they break. On the inside, all the mechanical work before you do the cosmetic work. Now, each one of these parts was different, each one was unique. Some needed body work, some needed reinforcement, some had cracks, some had no cracks. Every one of them, it was a giant labor of love, to say the least. But every one of them, when they were cleaned and they were primed, and of course sanded before they're primed, usually 600 or 400 paper even. These are parts that have a gel coat finish on them. So I wanted to make sure the paint got a good adhesion. And of course self-etching primer. And before I put the primer on, wipe with any good degreasing agent. This is Prep All, but there's better agents out there on the market, I know. This is just one we can get locally. The primer for this kind of a job, I always like to use self-etching primer. Self-etching primer gives you a little bit better bond, I think, to any paint, no matter what paint you're using. And one by one, now the parts, this bike, there are a lot of parts. So I wanted to make sure each one of them was in, or had all the body work done, had all the little tabs reinforced. Here's the CA reinforcing the tabs. And every video I have, every tutorial video, reinforce those tabs even before they break. CA is the best way to do it, followed up with some epoxy. It's such cheap insurance to do that while you have the bike apart, especially if you're going to paint it. Now, one by one, I got the parts primed, and this was the part, as I started laying them out on the floor and looking at that, this is a very complex paint job. This is really a super complex paint job. But before I can even start it, everything's got to be in clean primer. Now this, of course, is the part of the job that the video would be 100 hours long if you left the camera running. Endless amount of sanding, radiusing edges, getting the parts nice and smooth, making sure every tab, every place that these parts are going to bolt on is reinforced, getting a nice, clean, smooth surface, getting a coat of primer on it. And we were doing this job in some pretty just unusual weather, to say the least. And it was tough getting in and out of the weather, but we did get a couple parts done every day. And I've tried to explain to a lot of people that the prep for these parts, this part right here, getting it clean, getting it sanded, getting it etched, and then using the self-etching primer, if you leave one step out, you really compromise the whole project. Now in this case, there's, I don't know how many 100 hours went into this project, but every step of the way, I didn't want to compromise it and have the whole job be done and then have something crack or something break or something ripple up, or the worst of all worlds, when paint peels. Now, especially this fairing. These parts needed a lot of body work, and you don't really see it because a lot of the videos in fast forward, but this is where you start to eat up hour after hour after hour. And then to sand each coat of primer if there's a defect and reprime it. But anytime you do this kind of work, you just have to resign yourself to the fact it is truly a labor of love, and that's it. Now on this project, there was so many body work parts, seats, side covers, panels, a lot of parts on this bike, the cowl behind the seat, and every one of them needed to be in really clean, perfect prime before I would even start this, because the base coat on this project is going to be pearl white. And this is the paint that Mark bought, super expensive paint, and it had to be dealt with. He bought special thinner. He bought an unlimited amount of supplies for this job. And what happened was we did have a compatibility issue. But I wanted to make sure, no matter what, I want to start with clean. Here's the parts when they're sanded, and they're absolutely, any little flaw that's in there now is going to come through when we go to buff out the clear. I didn't want to take any chance that we get to this part in the job and it's compromised in some way. Now, the self-etching primer, I like to let it dry overnight. That's just me. And we were working, again, in some pretty crappy cold weather. This was not a pleasant time to be outside. And once I got those parts painted, I just wanted to get them in the garage, let them dry overnight as soon as possible, because there were so many parts on this job. And each one of them is going to have to be dealt with the white pearl, and with all that back masking and all that striping, there's going to be just an endless amount of masking tape going into this job. And I wanted it, more than anything, I wanted it to be perfect when I'm done. Now, on a project this big, there's always going to be little flaws. Once you prime it, you see it, you've got to fix it. And if you don't fix it, you always think it's going to go away by itself. It never does. So at this point, I have to take a break from trying to move on to the next step until a primer on all the parts that I'm going to be painting is going to be perfectly dry and overnight. I always like it overnight, and all the body work. Now, in this case, I did the body work several times on this using traditional body shop materials, and the result, when this job is done, the pearl white should be really, really nice. And it takes several times. Sometimes you have to go back over the body work 2 or 3 times. You dry sand it with the machine, wet sand it. Here I'm wet sanding it. It's just, it's hard to convince people how many hours go into this, because if you look at it on a video that's fast forwarded, you just think, oh yeah, that took 5 minutes. But a lot of things to get all the parts of the job. Now, I was working on, during the making of this video, 3 different bikes at the same time. So I was jumping from job to job, but I always give all the paint, especially the primer, plenty of time to dry before you move on. Let it outgas. So after all the body work and all similar to the parts we showed earlier in the video, the tank got its full body work. It got several coats of primer sanded. I put on the base white. Now this is a base white that goes under the pearl, and very, very carefully trying to get it on nice and even, nice and smooth, because whatever you put underneath the pearl shows. If there's a scratch, a dent, anything, or if you touch it with sandpaper, or if you put the tape on and you pull it up too quick, you can see the tape marks. Now the final pearl, and this was the problem that we had, and I don't really know if it was the thinner in this pearl or the thinner in the blue that made for a problem that we had to redo some of the parts of this tank. But in the end, it all worked out. It was just a compatibility issue, and I let that dry in the garage overnight. I try to always stack the deck in my favor by letting everything over dry. It's called outgassing on this type of paint. And in the end, it always plays in your favor not to rush these jobs through. Now, after all the trim and stickers were put on, the blue is the last thing. And the blue, there was a compatibility issue with the blue paint and the thinner with the white pearl. And boy, it required basically refinishing the whole tank from scratch. No reason to go back into that. That's a bad memory. But when I got the second paint job on the tank, I was very, very happy to get the clear on and see that I didn't have any issues, because once the clear is on, then you can tell if you're going to have any final issues, any alligatoring, any blistering, anything that isn't going to be perfect. And in the case of this, it trimmed out just exactly the way I really wanted it. I was really happy with that. I let the beginning of the clear flash off and took my time getting plenty of clear on here, because I really wanted to buff this out like a mirror. This bike ultimately wound up in, I think, in Dale's museum in Motorcyclepedia. We rode it for a while, and I think Mark kept it up there or stored it there or whatever he did. I'm not really sure. But it did wind up in a museum, so that was good. And I was real happy at this point in time. I was really thrilled, in fact. because every one of these jobs, it takes on a life of its own. There's always something you didn't anticipate. And in the case of paint, when you use 2 or 3 or 4 different brands of paint and 4 different kinds of thinner, boy, there's a lot of chance that something in there can come back and bite you. And in this case, it did bite us. So this was just part of the restoration footage. We have over 20 videos on the channel that cover that in detail. And what I wanted to do is include on this the shakedown ride that we had, which was a very memorable day. Bob, the late Bob NEVOLA, I have some footage of him that I'm going to include on here. Very nostalgic footage. For all the friends of Bobby, you'll enjoy seeing him in the video, of course. And Mark had a wonderful day the day he unveiled this, and only a few parts fell off the bike. So, and we actually had 2 sets of body work. If you look at the video in detail, there's actually 2 sets. We only did 1 set on this. And I didn't do the fairing. That consumed hours, probably 100 hours of trim on that. But it was I think a great restoration. So this is the first day out with the Fz600. And now the best part of any restoration, going on a shakedown ride and hoping some major part doesn't come off the bike. I'll tell you, you can't fault the paint work. Holy crow.
The paint work is nice.
We could fault the mechanical work, but not the paint work.
That's me.
That looks beautiful.
Yeah, this is the shakedown. This is the shakedown ride.
Okay.
I had this little headlight protector fell off on the way.
Oh yeah.
Rattled off, and I lost a screw here on the way on this side. So this is the shakedown ride. Figure out what's missing, what's not.
I got my bike 11 years. I'm still spots are falling off of it.
And it must have hit the highway and ground down.
So how many miles you got on this now?
It has 547 miles.
Wow. 547.
Go down 80 miles an hour.
And I got it.
Looking good.
I got it with 468.
Turbo Steve's gonna be so jealous. Did he see it yet?
I don't think he did. He's in DC. I called him.
Oh yeah?
Yeah, he's in DC.
Hey, it looks good, I'll tell you.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you've got a lot to do with it.
By the way, you want to see any restoration on this bike? Is what, 25 videos?
Something like that, yeah.
Windy Space U, and you got to put the space in. The pearl, it's expensive paint. I was wondering until I put the clear on if it was going to be worth it. It was worth it.
In the sunlight,
it really looks nice.
I see it.
I don't know if you can see in the
I see it.
the pearlescent that's in there.
It's in there. I see it.
That paint, that was really tough getting it looking that way. But
what's crazy is the historical plate.
I'm just amazed that with a sheer cliff like this, the rock doesn't, you know, with the rumbling of the cars and trucks and...
Yeah, someday.
It doesn't slice off.
Someday, baby.
Check from Atlanta.
If you see Morgan and I gain a few pounds, it's to celebrate. Are we celebrating that you're leaving or that you're coming back someday?
I don't know. People usually happy when I'm leaving. It's not a celebration.
What about your wife? Is she happy that you're leaving?
Oh no, she's not happy. She wants to know who's going to clean the driveway now.
Oh!
That's why you got kids.
Oh, yeah.
in editing this video, it brought back so many good memories. First of all, of our late friend Bob NEVOLA, and we miss him dearly. Everybody on the A-Team misses him. And having these videos of friends that have passed, absolutely priceless. Another thing that's priceless to me about the videos, in the beginning when we restore a bike, you never know where it's going to go. Sometimes you spend a lot of time and you're really not satisfied with it. This was a very good restoration. This was one that really, when it was all done, I was real happy with it anyway. And I know Mark was. And I know he rode the wheels off it before it actually wound up in a museum. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was one of his other bikes. But I haven't seen Mark in a few weeks anyway. And we did go out on I think, a great shakedown ride. Now, the whole idea of a shakedown ride like this is you never know. I mean, these are old motorcycles. And you never know if you've missed one of the pieces of the puzzle and or get a flat tire. But Bob rode with us that day, and he enjoyed the day, of course, like he always does. And I'm going to try to find more footage of Bob I have in my library. He was a wonderful guy. This bike is one of the bikes that I think is really worth restoring and keeping and enjoying. And it's a very, to me, a very cool looking, very nostalgic bike. I kind of like all the Yamahas with the ladders on them. I have a few of my own. And I enjoy these restorations in the winter. This one I think we did in the fall. It goes over a course of, I think, 27 videos. But they're all out there. And you can put my name in quotation marks. Get into YouTube, put my name in quotation marks. FZR or Fz600 restoration. And they'll all come up, as well as the FZR restoration. As well as every project we work on. Now, for me, having that video out there, so many good memories. So many things to share with new friends that I have new friends on a regular basis. And to share the information we have of the restorations and share the passion, share the fun, and biggest thing, our love of motorcycling. So thanks, guys, one and all. Thanks so much for watching.